right, this is week 4, Math 208, section 4.4, reviewing concepts and vocabulary. There's not really any calculations. We're just going to learn a bunch of words. So here it says, when the equal sign in the ax plus by equals c is replaced with one of these things, it becomes, and then we're going to call this an inequality. All right, and that's really it. So the idea is going to be when you have a graph. All right, and let's zoom out here. And let's say you have a graph, and I'm going to write here, boom, boom. So here's my coordinate axes. And let's say the graph is like, whoa, bam, like this, okay? Now, let's suppose, I'm just going to totally make this up. I'm going to say that this line right here is y is less than or equal to, let's make something reasonable. 2/3 x minus 4, okay? So what that means is it starts down here at -4, and then it goes up 2 over 3, up 2 over 3, up 2 over 3. So that's what that line is saying, right? So what you do is you graph your line just like the olden days, a few videos ago, or weeks ago, where you would pretend it was just this, y is equal to 2/3 x minus 4. So you just kind of pretend this inequality is an equal sign, and you graph it. But then what this inequality means is you have to shade one of these two sides. You're either going to shade this side, or you're going to shade this side. All right, and you have to decide. And so what you do, there's a couple of ways to do it. I use logic. If you look, this says y is supposed to be less than or equal to. So it basically means you're supposed to shade what is less than this line. So I think about like a above and below. This is above, so that would be greater. This is below, so that's less. So you would then shade this side. All right. Now here's another way you can show that you would shade below. So one way is you choose a point on either side of the blue line. And I'm going to choose this point right there because it is 0, 0. All right. And then what I do is I go and I take my little equation, my inequality. So it was y is less than or equal to 2/3 x minus 4. And I want to use this point as my test point, is what we call it, our test point. And I'm going to plug in 0, 0. So I end up with 0 is less than or equal to 2/3 times 0 minus 4. And so this ends up being 0. So I end up with 0 is less than or equal to -4. Now, is that a true statement? No, that is a false statement. So that means this point right here, this 0, 0, is false. That means I don't shade the false side. You never shade the false side. You always shade the true side. So if this side is false, that means the other side has to be true. And so that's the other way to decide which side you shade. You choose a point. You determine if it's true or false. If it's true, you shade that side. If it's false, you shade the other side. All right, so the directions say to describe the graph of y is less than or equal to k. All right, and so what you do is you begin with your graph and you treat it like an equation. You treat this like it's an equal sign. So really what you're going to do is you're going to graph y is equal to k. All right, and what the heck does y equal k look like? Well, y equals k is going to start at the origin, and it's going to go like this. So that's your y is equal to k. Now, because this is a less than or equal, Now, because it's an equal, right here, this part says equal, it means it's going to be a solid line. If it just said less than, it would be a dashed line. You would have these little dashes here. So y is less than or equal to k. Now we have to decide which side are we going to shade. Are we going to shade above or below? Well, because we're saying the word less, less goes with below. So we're going to shade below. And because it says less than or equal, that means our shading also has to include the line itself. So really, we're going to shade in everything below and including the line. And so what does that mean? That means our answer is C. All points below and including the line. So here we're supposed to describe the graph of y is greater than or equal to x. So this is very similar to that last one. So we're going to have a graph. And the first thing we're going to do is graph y is equal to x, which is going to be this line right here. So that's our y is equal to x. Y is greater than or equal to x. So now that, oh, and by the way, because it says or equal, that means it's got to be a solid line as opposed to a dashed line. And now we have to decide which side are we going to shade in, above the line or below the line. And because it says y is greater than x, the word greater means above. So we're going to shade above the line, and because it says or equal, right here, or equal, that means we have to include the line as well because it is allowed to equal. It doesn't have to be just up greater, it can also equal. So the answer of what are we going to shade in, we're going to shade all points above and including the line. So the answer is B. Now here it says, select the best answer when graphing a linear inequality containing either less than or greater than. What does that mean? Well, when you graph, if it says just less than or equal, so if it's like y is less than 2/3 x minus 4. So what the heck does that mean? You've got your graph, and let's make it reasonable. The graph says start at -4, so I'm just going to pretend that's -4. And then it says go up 2 over 3, up 2 over 3, up 2 over 3. So our graph is going to look something like this, let's just say. Up 2 over 3. That's reasonable. All right, so that's our graph. Now that happens to be the graph of y is equal to 2/3 x minus 4. But what we don't want y is equal to 2/3 x minus 4. We want y is less than 2/3 x minus 4. So the first thing is, because it says less than, that means we need to turn this line into a dashed line. It's supposed to be a dashed line. And because dashed lines is for less than or greater than only. All right, so there is our dashed lines, and I'm trying to make that real quick there. There's our dashed line. So we've turned it into a dashed line because it's less than. If it was less than or if it was greater than, it has to be dashed. If it has a or equal, then it would be a solid line. So in this case, the answer is it's got to be a dashed line. Now, the other thing is, but I'm going to go a little bit beyond and say, well, what side would we shade? Well, this says y is less than 2/3 x minus 4. So are we going to shade above or below? And since it's less than, that goes with below. And so we're going to shade everything below, but we're not going to include that dashed line. It does not include it. So as I've been suggesting so far, when you are going to graph this inequality, the first thing you do is you pretend it's a regular old equation, and then you graph it. So the first thing you do is you pretend it's a regular line and you graph it. And then the last piece of vocabulary is if two shaded regions represent the solution set for two inequalities in a system, then the solution set for the system is where these two shaded regions. Now I'm going to just quickly give you the answer, which is intersect. Now what the heck does that mean? What did I just say? Well, basically what I'm saying is you've got a graph, and let's say we've got two inequalities. So let's say we've got y is less than 2/3 x minus 4, and let's say we have y is greater than or equal to negative 2x plus 5. Okay, so let's quickly graph those. So when I graph this guy, I'm going to start at negative 4, and I'm just pretending where negative 4 is. And then I'm going to go up 2 over 3, up 2 over 3. So that's going to look like something like this. So there's my start at negative 4 and go up 2 over 3, up 2 over 3, up 2 over 3, up 2 over 3. All right. Now, but because it's a less than, not less than or equal, that means it's got to be a dashed line. So that really means dash, 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 dash. That line is supposed to be dashed. So that's what it looks like. So that's the first inequality. Now let's do the second inequality. And this happens to be a greater than or equal. So that means it's going to be a solid line. And so let's make a solid line. Now where does it start? Well, because it says plus 5, it means it's going to start up here at 5. And then the slope is down 2 over 1, down 2 over 1, down 2 over 1. So that line is going to look something along the lines of, let's see, down 2 over 1, down 2 over 1, something like that. All right? And it's a solid line because it's or equal. And so now it says, let's do the shading. Let's take care of the shading. So this part says y is less than 2/3 x minus 4. So here's our y is equal to 2/3 x minus 4. Are we going to shade above it or below it? Well, it's less than. So less than goes with below. So we're going to shade below this line. So I'm going to shade that, and I'm going to do it in red. So there is my shading. All right, and there is what it looks like. So there's the below. Now it says, let's do this one. We're going to shade y is greater than negative 2x plus 5. So is it going to be, here's the y is equal to 2x, negative 2x plus 5. And now are we going to shade above or below? Well, because it's greater than, we're going to shade above. So I'm going to shade that in, let's do green. So there is my shade. All right. So now you'll notice we've got 4 regions. We got this kind of V right here. We've got this region over here that hasn't been shaded at all. This little region up here, this V, has only been shaded in green. This little V has not been shaded at all. This V down here has only been shaded red. But this V over here has been shaded in twice with the red and the green. So that's the intersection of our shaded regions. So the real answer is the shaded section right here. This is our answer right here, that shaded piece that was shaded in twice with both the green and the red. So that's what we're talking about, the intersection of the shaded regions. So when we say what's the solution to these two inequalities, you graph them, you shade them, and the answer is the portion that has been shaded in twice. Now, of course, Desmos will do that for you. In fact, no, we'll show it to you in the next video.